When things are tough, when you're having a difficult time, are you able to turn to God? Good morning. This is Pastor Pete Seiferth from Northminster Presbyterian Church in Tucson, Arizona, with your Friday morning devotional thought. This past Sunday, there was a tragedy that happened in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. And that was when Dante Wright, a young black man, was pulled over for a valid traffic stop. And it was over the course of the events of that traffic stop that his life ended because of the actions of a police officer. And I don't want to get into the details of it. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a judge. I'm not someone who is in their community who is struggling with the reality of this. I'm not in Dante's family. I'm not a person of color. However, I think it's so important to reflect on these events and then the aftermath of the events as protests occur. It's important to reflect on those from the point of from the Christian point of view, from a biblical point of view. And what I think is so important for us, regardless of our background, if we are followers of Jesus Christ, it's to understand that in the Bible, we are given a real gift of prayer. And a type of prayer, a particular type of prayer that's helpful in moments like these, and that is a prayer of lament. We see this in the Psalms and we see in other locations in the Bible, but about 40% of the Psalms are in some way a lament before God about trouble. But what's so important about that is that in the experience of the trouble, that there is a turn to God. That is an essential ingredient in lament, that we realize that things are so hard and we don't have control, but we can turn to God who cares for us and is going to listen to us. In Psalm 10, this is a good example. It begins, "Why, Lord, do you stand far off? Do you hide yourself in times of trouble?" So there might be some really hard questions that we want to ask, but our first question as followers of Jesus Christ is to turn to God and say, God, are you really in this? Because it seems really, really hard. It's a real and honest question. Another important essential element of lament is a complaint. It's understanding and bringing to voice our frustration, our pain, and our questions. Psalm 10 continues, "In his arrogance, the wicked man hunts down the weak, who are caught in the schemes he devises. His ways are always prosperous. Your laws, God, are always rejected by him. He sneers at his enemies." There is frustration in the words of this psalm that are honest questions and relate to the hurt that are being experienced by this person. And another part of lament is turning to God for help. "Arise, Lord. Lift up your hand, O God. Do not forget the helpless. But you, God, you see the trouble of the afflicted," the psalmist says. And how important it is for us to turn to God, not just to complain, but to seek our help from God. And finally, another aspect of lament is a commitment to trust God. We see this as the Lord is king forever and ever, the nations will perish from his hand. Yet you, Lord, hear the desire of the afflicted. You encourage them, and you listen to their cry, defending the fatherless and the oppressed, so that mere earthly mortals will never strike terror again. Our hope is in God. And one of the miracles of Easter is that we are made into a new people, a resurrection Easter people who understand that our God has victory and sovereignty over sin and death, and yet the realities of sin still exist. And today I'm lamenting that there's a mom who is grieving the death of her son, Dante Wright. Then there are many other moms that are also grieving their children. I lament that. And I lament that there are law enforcement personnel that are in a position of just great difficulty and distress. I lament the situations that come when peaceful protests that are really, really good turn violent and that people are threatened. I lament that there is a centuries-long struggle for people of color and that when things like this happen, it digs up old wounds, and that hurts people. I lament that we live in a sinful world. And I don't have answers for that except to turn to God, to bring my emotions and all of who I am to God, and to trust in God's sovereign plan that God has this, that God will bring all things together. God will reconcile all things. God will bring justice. It's not an excuse to do nothing, but it certainly is an appropriate response as people of faith when we feel like we can't do anything. So instead of political arguments or taking sides, we want to always be where God is in a situation like this. And where would Jesus show up? Well, he would show up with those who are hurting. He would show up and be with those who need encouragement. He would speak truth to powerful institutions that are unjust. And I think our responsibility as followers of Jesus is to reflect his light in places where there's darkness. So friends, I hope this is encouraging to you today, that you will take some time to understand the power of lament and to realize that it really does end in hope. Lament just doesn't sit and wallow and become a victim, but lament turns us to a God who brings transformation and ultimate healing. If not on this side of the grave, certainly in eternity, because of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. God bless you, friends.